Good afternoon. My name is Marcy Mowry. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Parks and Forests Foundation, and thank you for joining us for our second Lunch and Learn. We at the Pennsylvania Parks and Forests Foundation are big fans of maps, and we find that the purple lizard map is one of the finest and one of our favorites. And we got to thinking about maps, and we understand that if you know how to read a map, that might help you find some new trailheads, avoid some of the crowded areas that you're finding in your parks and forests right now, and to help you practice social distancing. So today, joining us is founder and owner of Purple Lizard Maps, Michael Herman. Mike, just want to wave and say hi.
Hi.
Excellent. I have a few questions that I will be asking of Mike, but you may also post a question in the chat box, in the comment box, and I'll be monitoring those, and I will pose your question to Mike as time permits. If we don't get to all questions, we will work with Mike to try to find an answer to your question and post it at a later time in the chat box. So let me give you a little background on Mike. Mike Herman brings a lifetime of travel adventure with him, having lived in 6 states by the age of 14. At age 17, his father gave him a Suzuki GS550, and they rode to Newfoundland for 2 weeks, a trial by fire that made Herman a lifelong motorcyclist. He's a trained geographer and a professional cartographer, an avid traveler, snowboarder, and mountain biker. And he's built his career and life around adventure. And Mike's passion for adventure has enabled you to have access to a lot more adventures through his Purple Lizard maps. So, Mike, if I recall correctly, the Rothrock State Forest was your first Purple Lizard map. What inspired you to take a launch into map making, and why was Rothrock State Forest the first one that you chose?
Well, that was kind of my home ground. I moved to central Pennsylvania in 1979 as a teenager. I eventually got a degree in cartography from Penn State University. And Rothrock was the forest that I spent most of my time exploring. And then my first corporate cartography job took me out west to outside of Denver, Colorado, with National Geographic and Trails Illustrated. And I saw these, I was helping them make these amazing maps, and we didn't have anything like that in Pennsylvania. So that was sort of the impetus, was me wanting to have the creative freedom to do things a little differently, and realizing that the whole genre of recreational trail maps that was really popular out west just didn't exist for people in Pennsylvania. So I came back to the East Coast and started Purple Lizard in 1997.
Excellent. And I mentioned to a couple of people that I would be talking to you today, and one question that people kept asking me is, why Purple Lizard?
Well, everybody wants part of that is I looked at, I took an inventory of all the existing map companies, and they were all kind of old, boring names, like, Rand McNally and things like that. And I wanted to have a company that was a lot more sort of exciting and fun sounding. And I also wanted something that would work visually. So the idea of a Purple Lizard came to mind. I think I was also very influenced by a childhood book called Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Oh, yes.
So that is a wonderful children's storybook that was a big part of my young upbringing. And Harold has a purple crayon, and he draws wherever he wants to go. So he draws a lake and draws a sailboat and goes sailing. And I felt that was pretty analogous to sort of what we're doing with making maps.
Marvelous. And I almost feel like we're developing a tribe of Purple Lizard followers, those of us who have stickers on our cars or on our water bottles. And I know that when I see a sticker in a parking lot, I'm thinking, oh, they're also a big fan of your maps. I have some of your maps here with me. And I was hoping that you could walk us through the process of from idea to map. How do you create a map? And how do you go from the idea to the printing of these maps, which are printed on waterproof, destructive-proof paper, which is wonderful?
Yeah, it's a great material. We really like the material that we print on. The concept behind the making of the map first is sort of, what people don't think about is trying to figure out where the map ends. So that's sort of our biggest challenge when we start to lay out a map, is what gets included and what doesn't. So how the bigger you make the map, the smaller the things get on it. So there's a trade-off there. So we don't want to give up a certain level of detail, but we also need to include certain trailheads or certain ends of bike paths or certain communities that are anchor points on it. So that's a big part, is just trying to figure out where that map's going to be. And then it's a question of what's the inventory of everything that's on it. Most of our maps are centered around a state or national forest, but there's also a lot of public lands that we include that are not state forest, that might be conservancy lands, might be bike paths, might be community parts or bigger inholdings. So trying to figure all of that out plays a big role in our initial concept on it. And then we literally, before we actually lay it out, we visit the place and we drive around. We try to get a sense of it. You know, we hike parts of it. We bring our mountain bikes and ride mountain bikes on part of it, and we talk to all the locals that we can run into, and just get a sense of how everybody's using that landscape. And all that plays into it before we even begin to actually get to the hard work of making the map.
About how long does that process take you, Mike?
Well, that can be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, as we sort of try to get a handle on an area and determine if it's an area that we think is one that we would want to prioritize. And then it's also a process of meeting. The next step is the meeting with the land managers, because, you know, ultimately, if it's a state forest with state parks in it, we want to talk to the land managers and say, we'd like to make this map. What can we do that would help you guys out on this? You know, what can we bring to the table? What can we include on our maps that you can't include on your maps? Maybe because you don't have the scale or you don't have the resources. So that sort of develops the big picture. And that's usually about the part when we start to get excited about it as well, because then it moves into a whole second stage. And that's a little bit of being on the ground and figuring it out. But that stage is also a lot about trying to get the data and starting to work on it on the computers.
And how do you gather that data?
It's a hodgepodge. It's called data mining. Okay. So for the digital data, we're going to the internet, and there are a bunch of basic partnership sites that we can work with, where we try to bring in things like the shaded relief models and the political boundaries of the forest and the roads. We accumulate every paper map that we can of the area, and we study those as well. And then we have to sort it all out and try to figure out what's real and what isn't real, because all that data that you download off the internet, you know, a lot of that is junk. A lot of that's not true. So in our maps, one of the things that we show that you don't see very often is the difference between when a road turns to dirt and when it turns to pavement. And the only way we can really figure that out is we have to be on that road and we have to mark where it turned to dirt, because the other resources that you might find aren't that trustworthy.
I can think there are many of people who have followed an app to travel from a place in some rural parts of Pennsylvania, and were surprised when they ended up on an unpaved road, or they were maybe fording a stream in order to get from point A to point B. So that's good to know that your map.
Yeah, we have fun stories of running into those exact people. Actually, we've more than one occasion we have met people in the middle of the forest, and in a type of a car that really doesn't belong that deep in the middle of the forest. And they roll down the windows and they say, where am I, and when am I going to get to a highway? And it's always the same story. There was a construction delay on Route 80 or on the turnpike or something, and their GPS rerouted them on a shortcut, supposedly through a dirt network of state forest roads that they were not expecting.
Oh, and hopefully it's in the summer when the roads are maintained and they're not slippery with snow or ice.
Yeah, it can get people in trouble.
It really can. So you drive every road? Do you hike every trail in order to ground truth it?
To a degree. Yeah, I can't say we absolutely every, but I would bet our ratio is well over 80%. Because we're trying to find if that trail crosses that road, you know, where the other maps say it does. because oftentimes they don't. And then same with the intersections internal on the trail system. So we get some hints because we reach out to the users in that place, the people that have the local knowledge, the active hiking clubs and groups, certainly DCNR and the foresters. So they give us a sense of the existing maps. They'll know, they'll tell us, well, this whole section of trail was rerouted maybe because of a logging or because of a flooding, or this bridge was out, so we had to move something, and it's never been updated on the maps. So that really focuses us to go to certain spots and try to figure out what the new landscape looks like.
Got it. That makes sense. Sometimes when you're out hiking in a forest, more so than a park, you come across trails that aren't on a map, and maybe you wonder if they're true trails or social trails. Are you on your maps? Are you ensuring that they are legitimate trails?
Yes, that's probably one of the biggest advantages to a Purple Lizard map, is that if the trail is on our map, then that's a trail that we got permission from the land managers to put on, because that is a big problem with the apps and the public source data and the social trails. Trails get built illegally, or they're old roads that were decommissioned and people are sort of using them but shouldn't. And what the general public doesn't always know is the reasons behind that. So there could be environmental impact studies going on. It could be an area that's going to be logged in the future. We had a situation where somebody asked us why we didn't show this trail, and I remembered it because it's a trail that you see on the ground when you get there. But we had talked to the land managers, DCNR, and asked them about that, and they said, no, we don't blaze that trail or encourage that trail, because that trail leads to the largest denning population of rattlesnakes that we're aware of.
That could be a surprise.
So that's a great situation where you're like, we really don't want to encourage a whole lot of people to go down to that particular part of the forest.
Excellent. And that really helps to keep people safe as well, because if you're on an undesignated trail, if you don't return to your car, it's a little bit harder to figure out where to start to look. So, I mean, I think
exactly.
Yeah. So you've gathered all this information, you've done the ground truthing, then you go back to your computer. What's that process look like?
That process looks like a giant, we call it a spaghetti puzzle, because it's layers and layers and layers of lines, and we're trying to make sense of those lines, and we're trying to start to symbolize them so that they look like our lines, so that you can tell the paved roads look paved and the trails look like trails. And then it's really just, it's a big process of sorting through all of that and trying to come up with this mix between, they say cartography is a mix between art and science, and our maps definitely lean towards the art side. So we want them to be very accurate, but we also want them to be very legible, easy to read, and sort of intuitive. So one of the things that changes on our maps and on most maps is like the contour line interval. So the contour lines is what tells people how steep the trail gets, or how the landscape looks. These are the lines on the map that represent the elevation.
Okay.
And there'll be a different distance between those lines. And you have to read the legend on our map to find out if that's a 10-foot interval or a 20-foot interval or a 50-foot interval or more between each line. And the reason it varies is because some forests are much steeper than other forests. So you couldn't do a 10 or 20-foot interval because they would all blend together and you'd have a solid mass. You wouldn't see any differentiation between them. So that's one of the things that we generate our own contour lines, and we play with a couple different intervals in that process. And when we're out working in the map in the field, we'll decide, boy, it's just too busy. There's too many contour lines, or there's not enough contour lines. And we work to try to come up with what we think is the perfect balance on that map.
Great. And contour lines are so important. Let you know what you're in for, in terms of when you're out hiking. And sorry, my phone is ringing here. So you get that, you get it printed. Can you talk a little bit about the paper and the end product of the map, and
Sure.
It's just really such an amazing product.
Yeah, we really like that paper. And in a way, it's referred to as paper, but as you can tell by feeling it, it feels more like a plastic. And it's sort of a mix. I mean, it's literally, in the industry, it's called a synthetic paper. So they're trying to combine the best of both. So they are totally waterproof, but they don't have that heavy feel like a laminated thick plastic map would. We also like, from the art side of it, it has sort of like a nice sheen to it, sort of a semi-gloss color to it that just makes it attractive. And it has it's just overall, it's a substantial feeling map. It's strong enough so it will last for quite some time. If you've ever hiked with the traditional, like we always used to take the USGS topo maps out, the paper ones, and we'd fold them up or we'd keep them in plastic bags, and you'd hope that it survived your hike. But usually it didn't take much moisture or water to get on it, and it would start to fall apart. So one of the big things I like about our material is you can fold it any way you want, really. I mean, they have a nice fold to them, but you can bend that map around and jam it in your backpack or your pocket, so it's just the area that you're hiking that afternoon. And you don't have to worry about it tearing or creasing or falling apart on you.
Right, and that is a great attribute. Oftentimes we use the maps very often in my household. We find little lizards hidden throughout the map. What does that signify?
Right. Well, we're a little purposely vague on that. The legend will say that this could mean anything. They often refer to a vista or an overlook. They might also mark a ruins, maybe an old CCC camp or something like that. They might mark a feature on the landscape like a waterfall, or anything that really caught our eye when we were out there. Sometimes it might be a little patch of hidden old growth forest, and we'll just put a lizard there.
So just for people to be alert.
Yeah, and it gives people a destination, and otherwise there wouldn't be a particular reason to go to that spot. So the lizard's a fun destination to find. And with that same thought in mind, we have to be very careful where we put those lizards, because that's also a discussion with the land managers, because sometimes there are spots where we wanted to put a lizard, and the land managers or the conservation folks involved in it will say, that place is under a lot of pressure and we'd rather not have any more people go there, than know about it already. So we've had discussions with a lot of locations like that, because we don't, and it's two sides to that, right? Do you keep an area secret and not let people go? The other side of it is some areas that people are going to and the wrong element of people are going to. By us putting a lizard there and putting more sunshine on it, that can help that area not be a party site or be vandalized, because you'll get more people going to it. And the folks that might be spray painting it or something like that suddenly will be like, oh, well, everybody knows about this place now, we can't do this.
Right. Yeah, that is. I could see where there's a balance. So I see Pam's putting a legend up there, and that was my next question. Some people don't have a lot of practice with using maps. So if someone were to get a purple lizard map, how would they start? What would be the process for utilizing the map to help them explore an area?
It's a good idea to glance at the legend on any first map that you get, just to see what might be on there that maybe you weren't aware was on there. So we'll have the traditional, the lines you would expect. There'll be primary routes or highways or dirt roads. But then the trails, we'll classify them by foot only or shared use or ATV, or different designations, as different forests have different types of trails. And then we use symbols to point out the campgrounds or the backcountry campsites or the picnic areas. And depending on the map, when you glance down those symbols, it's neat, because sometimes you might find a symbol or two that is new to you that you didn't realize that existed. So you'll sort of be like, oh, what did they mean by that? So that might introduce you to an area or a feature on the map that you didn't realize existed before. And then once you sort of get a general sense of what the symbols mean and the lines mean, the next step is to just open up that map. And our maps are all pretty big. The majority of our maps are 2 feet by 3 feet on each side. And then open up that map and find, locate either where you are on the map, if you're actually on the map, or maybe a place that you plan on going if you're studying the map, on your kitchen table, planning the weekend's trip. So you might say, like in Michaud, they'll say, oh, well, I know, we know Caledonia State Park. We always go to Caledonia State Park. And so you'll be able to find that on the map. But then what's really fun and rewarding for us is watching people go through this process. And it's a place they've been to a million times. But when they lay out our map and look at it, they'll say, oh, I didn't know this was just around the corner. I didn't know there was this lake just 2 miles from the state park. We never went down there. So especially now with COVID-19 and the quarantine and people really kind of overpopulating a lot of the easy places to get to, like the state parks, you can grab a Purple Lizard map and you can poke around on it and find that little lake that you never heard of before. You can find the more distant trailheads that people don't usually hike, not the mid-state trails or the Appalachian trails, and go find those. And you might find a spot where you're the only car at the trailhead. Perfect.
And you might discover a new favorite place.
There's so many beautiful places, and as much as we have all these trails on the maps, a lot of them just go to areas that don't have a whole lot of trails. So in the state of Pennsylvania, that's what a lot of our natural areas are. So you can go to a natural area, and on the map, it won't look like there's really many trails on there. There might just be one trail into it. But what you'll find when you get there usually is there's a reason it's a natural area. It's such a beautiful spot. And you can wander around on some maybe fisherman paths or some deer paths, and just explore that area and find out why it was designated a natural, what the natural beauty of it is.
Nice. I remember getting into a debate with a friend of mine who had a very old map one time when we were out. And I said, you really need to make sure that your map is current because information could change. And he was of the camp of, no, it's fine. Things don't change that quickly. How often do you update your maps?
We look to update our maps at least every 3 years. It's usually arranged depending on what's changed in that map and how busy we are and some other factors on it. But, on a really dynamic forest, that might be more like 2 years. And by a dynamic forest, I mean a forest that is either under a whole lot of pressure from population groups using it. And so the foresters are working with the different friends groups and they're actively making new trails, or they're connecting different areas within the park. The other thing that we see changes a lot is the gated roads. Roads, those older maps often don't have gates. That's something that is a big failure on the GPS routing systems too, because they're often unaware of a Forest Service gated road.
Good point.
So, and the gates are tricky because a lot of those are seasonal gates. A lot of the forests will close certain roads in the winter because the road's too dangerous to access and too remote. Or they go the other way. They close them in the summer, maybe because it's a nesting habitat or, an environmental reason like that they're closed. So on some of our maps, if it's a seasonal gate, we'll show it as such. But the gated roads are also the favorite for people to go hiking and go mountain biking on for that reason, because now you have a nice wide road that has no car traffic on it.
Wonderful. We just want to remind people, if you are hiking on one of those, don't park in front of the gate, because that also can be an emergency access road, particularly during this time of year when it's wildfire season. So you want to make sure that if you're exploring one of those roads, don't park in front of the gate. And I see here Pam is showing what a gate or a barrier on the road would look like. And there's the purple lizard. Cool place, scenic vista, or local legend, etc. ... So that leaves it to the imagination. You are a 1% for the Planet business, and with your assistance, PPFF became a 1% for the Planet nonprofit. What does it mean to be a part of 1% for the Planet?
I think that's just such a great organization, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to give back through a broader channel. And as you mentioned, we've brought a lot of people into that organization as well as recipients. So folks like yourself that are doing great work, helping the forests, helping them meet some of the needs that they're struggling with. 1% does that both on a local level and on a global level. So I feel like that's one of those organizations that we just without hesitation was happy to join and be a part of, and help promote them by putting their symbol on all of our maps.
Yes, and if you're not familiar with the symbol, I'll bring that up here. That's the 1% for the Planet symbol. Let me see. I'm looking to see if there's any questions. We had a couple of comments. We had somebody who loves the purple lizard maps in Puerto Rico. There is a suggestion that they're great for exploring the Pennsylvania wilds in more detail. Somebody made a comment that they may have had an experience where they got to a vista and it wasn't there anymore. So
that happened.
That happened.
That does happen, and that's a curious thing. We make that determination lots of times when we're at a vista, because they grow up. The trees,
yes.
the forest grows up around it, and so sometimes on our revised maps, we'll have to take a lizard off because we go back there and we're like, 5 years ago you could stand here and see over the trees, and now the trees all got 4 feet taller, and now we don't have a vista. And then that's also then the discussion goes back to DCNR, because we'll often bring it to their attention, and they'll make the determination if they want to go out and cut the trees down to open up the vista, or for internal management reasons, they might decide that they don't want that to be a scenic vista pullover spot anymore, and they'll just let the trees grow up, and we'll take the lizard spot off.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for responding to that.
1%. The forest is very dynamic, so all that stuff is changing
constantly, and you may have that. Sometimes things are changing because they're growing, but we've had a lot of really odd weather patterns of the past few years. So, even though that you're doing these every 2 years, you may find that, we've had like the rains we've had the past day, a gully washer came through and took out a bridge. So, we do our best all the time, but Mother Nature sometimes has other plans for those things we put into place. 1% for Nature made the comment that they're excited about the prospect of you coming to northeastern PA. Do you have an idea of where your next map might be? I know you just released the Loyalsock, which is the one I keep holding up. Do you have any other maps in the works?
We are working on Cook Forest. So
wonderful.
Cook Forest is the newest map in Pennsylvania that we'll be working on this spring. We just started that. We sort of started it last year. We met with the Cook Forest Conservancy, and we met with DCNR, and we spent a few days down there exploring it, and it's just a absolutely stunning forest. A little bit different than a lot of the other forests, because it's also land management wise, it abuts Allegheny National Forest, so it's sort of part of a larger federally managed landscape. So there's more land agencies for us to interact with on it. But that's going to be the map that we dive into here in the next few months. The other map that we started last year that's a little bit stalled right now, but we're doing a 2-map series of Shenandoah in Virginia.
Nice.
And so that's stalled right now because that because of the COVID-19, that entire park is closed. So
yeah, that's right.
we can't go there and work on that project at all.
We had a question. Is there any consideration for doing one for the Tuscarora State Forest?
We are looking at Tuscarora. We'd love to do Tuscarora, in part because that's right next to us. We're based in Central PA, and it connects the dots between Rothrock, Bald Eagle, and Michaud.
Yes.
That forest sort of fills in from Lewistown and Huntington down to Carlisle. So
yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah, but it's on our list. I don't know if that'll be a this season project, but we definitely want to do that one.
So, you went through the whole process for us. Roughly how long does that take from we have an idea to here's your new map?
Pretty commonly 2 years,
Okay.
which is longer than people expect, and it's not 2 years continuous every day in that forest, but the process of getting to know it and then laying it out and then starting to make intensive visits down there to sort it all out. It's pretty rare that we can pull that off in one season. So it's usually 2 year project.
Well,
So
that also gives. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So if we started Tuscarora late this fall, maybe we could get it done by the end of next fall, but it might roll over to the following one. And
Okay.
the weather's a big deal too. This year, Loyalsock got stalled because once the snow and ice band moves in, we're done. We can't, if we have a warmer fall and we can push later into the winter and have winter access, because winter access is one of the best times to be working on the map. Like when the leaves are down in the fall, you get those sight lines. So for finding trails,
Yeah.
you're not fighting through the nettles and the sticker bushes. So that's a really nice time to be out in the field to try to figure out where things go, because you can see through the forest so well. But as soon as we get that nasty Pennsylvania rain, ice, slush mix, and those roads get covered, then we're kind of done. You just can't. You don't have access back there anymore.
That's a good point. And weather is very unpredictable. And in fact, I think one of the last times you and I ran into each other was you were working on the Loyalsock map. We had a chance to chat up there at World's End State Park.
Yeah.
Yes. We had a couple more comments. Someone very excited about Cook Forest map coming, and somebody is very happy because you've given her the ability to daydream with her Bald Eagle map. So yeah, it is great for pulling out a map and dreaming about where you're going to travel next. Mike, is there?
That's one of my favorite things about maps. It always has been. I mean, even the maps that obviously that I've made and I'm immersed in, I still open up any of our maps and just sort of glance around it, and I look at an area and be like, I've got to get back to that spot. That was so awesome back there, and it's been years. I got to get back there.
Yes, I am the same way. I have a passion for maps. I'm always looking at them and I'm thinking about when can I clear my calendar so I can go explore this particular place. So yes, we do. People can purchase maps on your website, or we also sell them through the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation, and Pam can run that up. For every map that's purchased through PPFF, we put $3 into a trail maintenance fund. We have a lot of trail maintenance challenges across our trail system in the Commonwealth. And one of the things that our friends groups are doing is they're doing a lot of work on trail maintenance. And as you said, trail connectors and new trails to help people explore their areas. Mike, I think we're running out of time. I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us on map making, your process, whatever you would like to share. We really appreciate you spending time with us.
Sure. Well, I'd like to thank you. I mean, what I appreciate is organizations like yours that are out there on the forefront of actually educating people about the resources that we have in the forest and helping them manage them and help them get the resources that they need. And I'm also continually just humbled by our customer base and the people that are out looking for all the lizards and letting us know when they found them and looking forward to the next map. I think that's the biggest source of joy having a small business, is knowing that when you put a new map out and your customers get very excited and they're out there using it and having a great experience with it.
Yeah, they're waiting for it. They're waiting for the next one. Pam showed briefly there your website. In the comments, Pam also put your blog. So if folks want to follow your website and your blog, they can hear about your latest adventures or find out what's coming up, or maybe get to know a place a little bit better because you've been there and you're sharing your experience having traveled there. So do look in the comments section to find the link to the blog so that you can follow Mike and the adventures of Purple Lizard Maps. So Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited we were able to have this conversation and learn a little bit more about your map making process. And thank you for what you do and for helping to get people outside and be safe while they're outside exploring our wonderful public lands. I hope you continue to do well during these unusual times, and hopefully you'll be able to get out soon to get back to your map making.
We're looking forward to it. We certainly are. And thank you. It was wonderful being here with you.
Yes,
I look forward
you.
to actually seeing you out in the field again.
Yes, I look forward to running into you as well. Take care.
Yep. All righty. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.